I was just having a conversation earlier with some Jews who were saying things like, Christianity is okay for Christians. And I was saying to them, look, you're supposed to take a position against idolatry. You know Christians are guilty of idolatry, but in your very, very long history, you have not told Christians what they really, really, really think of their religion. And God may be punishing you for that omission. Those weren't my exact words, but that was really what I was trying to say. So the question arises as to, well, whether I'm correct in saying that it matters that these Christians are idolaters, because if they are the world's most powerful religious group, and they are officially still the world's most numerous religious group in control of more territory than any other religious group, then it must mean that Christians are the world's most powerful religious group. But we know that actually it's not the case, and people don't respect Christians, but lying politicians would pretend to be Christian in order to claim for themselves a greater moral respectability, and they still do it, and nobody really believes them, but they still do it, almost out of custom, out of tradition, of pretending that one actually has a religion rather than claiming to be atheist. So is it important to conceive of God in the correct way? I'm saying Jews are supposed to think it's really important, and so do Muslims, because both Jews and Muslims have the idea that it is sinful to associate partners with God. So Jews would call associating partners with God as shituf, but they can't decide whether it's better or worse than idolatry. So they have two kinds of theological misdemeanor, I suppose you call it. So avodah zarah is idolatry, and idolatry is bowing before idols. And Muslims have finessed this idea into open idolatry and hidden idolatry. And Muslims are saying that idolatry can take the form, can be thought crime, basically. So they're saying if you pray too loudly or you pray too softly, you're probably guilty of idolatry, and hypocrites go to hell. And if hypocrisy means anything at all, it means pretending to believe in stuff you don't in the hope that people will think you are morally superior than a person who doesn't believe in this thing. And of course, I'm talking about God and the afterlife. So if you pretend to believe in God when you don't, you would be doing it for the purpose of ingratiating yourself with mum and dad if it's important to them that you follow their religion. And if they're not related to you, you are probably claiming to believe in God and the afterlife where good will be rewarded and evil punished, to show people that you're less likely to break the rules than if you were an atheist. That would be the usual reason for pretending to believe in God when you don't. Now, what if you say you believe in God, but think he's Jesus, which is shituv, and associating partners with God. What is the problem? So those people I was talking to earlier on the Vartirecci stream, they were saying, it doesn't matter. There's only one Abrahamic God. It's vaguely correct. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it. What difference does it make? And I'm saying it is the difference between being a true believer and being a hypocrite. And hypocrites go to hell. If you're going to take the Quran seriously, and why not if you or why not if you want to go to heaven? Why not if you actually believe in God? So if you take it seriously, then hypocrisy is a terrible thing that could end you up in hell. But what has it to do with conceiving of God correctly? I think it's a systemic and mechanical problem. I think the religion is saying, if you do not conceive of God correctly, then everything else will go wrong. You'll be guilty of idolatry, even without even realizing it, and because you don't realize it, you will be doing the other things that you are commanded. Let me start again. If you get the first commandment, if you break the first commandment, then you're more likely to break the other commandments. Because it is only through obeying the first commandment, unquestioningly, or at least obeying it faithfully, if you don't, what am I think I'm getting tired. If you don't protect yourself from acts of idolatry, both hidden and open, then you're obviously not taking God and the afterlife seriously. And this means that you're an atheist. And if you're an atheist, you're more likely to break the other rules. So instead of a race to the bottom, how about a race to the top? Which is to move as far possible towards the ideal that we can, rather than bumping along at the bottom with our very low standards and saying to ourselves, oh, I think I managed to get away with it this time, but don't tell anyone. In Buddhism, in the Eightfold Path, there is this instruction about having the right thought. This is how it goes: right thought, right speech, right action. So this advice of thinking correctly is particularly about idolatry. It is saying that if the really important foundational fact of of a very important instruction, such as no idolatry, if you get that wrong, then everything else will go wrong. And so you had better get it right. And if you're not sure whether you're right or wrong, the least you can do is consider, to the best of your ability, whether your religion is idolatry according to the definition by Maimonides. And the third principle of Judaism, which states that God is not in any way physical or material. I think an atheist would be able to understand quite easily what I'm saying. Atheists would say God is a lie. He doesn't exist. To the extent that God exists, he exists as much as a unicorn might, or a fairy, or a leprechaun, or some other fictitious being. Nevertheless, fiction, which you could call a lie, has the effect of affecting your behavior. So if you were told that by doing X you would get Y, and you want to get Y, then you will do X, even if that person was lying to you that doing X will get you Y. And the point of this is to say that we can, believing something to be true, rely on its truth to make our plans. For example, a date. I make a date. I make an arrangement to meet you in a certain place, thinking you will be there, and then we'll go and have a good time to do what we arranged to do. But I'm only going there because I think you're going to be there and we're going to have a good time. But it might not be true. I might meet you and have a terrible time, or I might not meet you at all and have an evening of disappointment, possibly. But we don't know. We don't know if the information we have is reliable or not. And we have to guess. We have to assess and take a gamble after deciding whether it is worth the gamble of going to this place in the hope that there will be a meeting and a good time will be had by all. So it would appear that the most important question we should be asking ourselves is what is true and what is false, and what is right and what is wrong, and what is good and what is evil, which I don't think very many people do discuss. But perhaps we can all start to have a think about whether Christians correctly conceive of God and why it is important for the repose of their immortal souls. If they persist in their idolatry, if indeed it is idolatry they are guilty of. But we don't know if these Jews are being truthful when they say it's okay for Christians to be Christian. It sounds to me rather tautologous. I rather think that they are avoiding giving offense to Christians because of the historic tendency of Christians to become very nasty and violent when their Trinity is questioned, either by other Christians or by Jews. So an element of caution has entered into the minds of Jews and Muslims who probably are fearful of antagonizing their Christian overlords. But if they had done this a long time ago, centuries ago, then it is possible that the European, having converted to Islam, would actually be much better behaved than if they had stayed Christian. And so, by not doing their dawah, Muslims in the Middle Ages have harmed themselves by their omission to convert Europe to Islam. Possibly, the European monarchs would not be changing their religion. It wouldn't just be their subjects not liking it. It could spell trouble with neighbouring Christian kingdoms, I suppose. So perhaps the time wasn't right. But I'm saying if it had been done earlier, that the Muslims might have been able to avoid the violence of the Crusades. But anyway, they didn't, and they suffered, and they're still suffering and moaning about the Gazans and stuff. So it could be deduced that God, if he exists, is punishing Muslims for their sins of omission. And I'm just here to remind them that if they're complaining about being the eternal victims of Jews and Christians, it could be because a long time ago they did not obey the commandment contained in chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran, which tells them to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. But this omission could be remedied, and this I encourage them to do. And I think it would help if Jews and Muslims actually got together and discussed whether their suffering could be a form of divine punishment or a divine conspiracy to cause bad things to happen to people who call themselves Jews and Muslims, who are really hypocrites, who don't even believe in the things that they're supposed to believe in. So I suppose I have answered my question about why it is important to correctly conceive of God, because if you don't correctly conceive of God and think he's Jesus, then that would make you a Christian. This would make you be the victim of inferior scripture that gives you no useful guidance about the laws you should have in your theocracy. And this would mean the corruption of the morals of your ruling classes, who don't care about the national interest and keep making up the rules as they go along, because they're just not in a religion that has divine legislation that they could just follow with good results. But the silver lining on this particular cloud is that it's not too late. It's actually not too late for all these idolaters to repent of their idolatry. And were they to do such a thing, they could be just like the Ninevites, who repented and were saved. I should give another example of not correctly conceiving of God, and they have the technical names of pantheism and panentheism, which is equating God with the universe. This was actually an idea of Spinoza, the first secular Jew who was excommunicated because of his heresy. His heresy was not being a polytheist, but with conceiving of God as something material, i.e., the universe. What is the problem of this? What is the problem of equating the universe with God? It means that Spinoza and those who agreed with him would not be, in fact, worshipping the Abrahamic God, but something else. And this something else would be indifferent to the hearts and minds of humanity, and I suppose the long and short of it is that we are not supposed to think of God as indifferent, because we could so easily think of him as being all-knowing and perfectly moral, as well as being compassionate towards us. So basically, what is the difference between trusting in God and denying God, or not trusting in God? The simplest way I can put it is that if we did trust in God, then we would obey his laws and make life better for ourselves and our society, than if we didn't trust in God and didn't obey his rules. I hope I've made myself reasonably clear, but if not, I apologize.